Witness Me by Humble Narrator, Chapter 11, the start of a new chapter in this accursed world. Waiting at the front entrance of the Ring of Fire was Itachi and Kisame waiting by his side as they not only patiently waited to face off against Orochimaru, but speculate as to what this place used to be since many of its things had been stripped, but some semblance of the old world remained, like polished wood walls and floors made up of that speckled floor tile. I think this place may have been a hospital at some point, said Kisame. I don't think hospitals were that equipped with this much security footage. If anything, I would say that this may have been at some point a police station, said Itachi. You are both wrong, came the voice of Salem as she and Orochimaru stood atop of the stairs while looking down on Itachi and Kisame. This place was a safe house built under the pretense to keep those in this town safe from not only bombs but from any outside threats, all funded by the townspeople before the mayor went and turned his back on everyone, leaving them to their fates, said Salem. But I know you care little to nothing to not caring at all about this, said Salem as Orochimaru made his way down to confront Itachi for the last time. Orochimaru, you have some nerve, scoffed Itachi. Bold words from the man who's come to surrender himself, all for the sake of his little brother, said Orochimaru mockingly. Truth of the matter, I was sent here mainly because knowing you to still be alive is nothing but an ever-living threat to not only us, but to those who serve for the windmill warlords, said Itachi. You wouldn't happen to have such a thriving society if not for the assistance of I, Tsunade, and Jiraiya. Ho Musabi Itachi, said Orochimaru. No, we would not, though we do live a lot better without you, especially, said Itachi, calmly as Orochimaru was staring to lose his chill. Enough of your ignorance and insolence, lest you want that little brothers of yours dead, said Orochimaru, trying to bait out Itachi now. I've already said that I came here under the orders of my father to kill you. I said nothing about saving Itachi, said Orochimaru. You mean to tell me that you, Ho Musabi Itachi, and that foolish Fujin Fugaku would allow a member of your family to die? Explained Orochimaru, as this was hard to believe. By the sound of, I take it that Sasuke had withheld the fact he was not only stripped of his title, but was disowned and sent out into exile, said Itachi, as Orochimaru felt an uneasy pinch in his gut, knowing that the situation was going out of hand and out of their favor. Salem quietly snuck away from the scene to make her escape, as Orochimaru stood there and angrily shook in rage. Like a 2-bit fiddle, he had been playing for not only letting his presence be aware, but his one means of leverage was non-existent from the start since the recent revelation. Damn, that illegitimate leader for the bastard he raised in this world, said Orochimaru with his teeth clenched, as Itachi took a moment to reflect between what he and Orochimaru had been talking about. I agree, but that still doesn't change the fact that you need to die, said Itachi as he took out his flame sword as Orochimaru began to take his katana out of its scabbard. Elsewhere, as the flooded waters made its way to the fiery engines within the Ring of Fire, all the power within this place was starting to cut off, which mattered nothing to Yang or Naruto as they grabbed one of the wall-mounted torches and continued to race out of this one of the hells on Earth. We got to hurry up. I don't know how much longer we can stay here before we're belly deep in water, said Naruto. What do you know? What? Don't you know how to swim? Asked Yang. No, do you? Asked Naruto. Kinda, said Yang, as they nonetheless picked up the pace and made it to another flight of stairs. It wasn't until they made it to the 4th floor that they realized that half the damn stairway was torn in half. Now what? Asked Naruto in disbelief. What happens is that we either wait and risk getting the waters rise enough for me to swim and you drown, or you hop your ass over there on the other side and give me a hand and to get across safely, said Yang, seeing as there was no room for option, Naruto running room, not with little running room he was given. Naruto was barely able to hang onto the ledge of the stairs as the wood did creak and moved a little. Untethered, Naruto climbed his way up to the fragile stairway before he laid his body over with both arms extended. Now it was Yang's turn to give her shot in the leap of faith, where thankfully Naruto managed to grab her arm. However, the loud sound of wood breaking and the sudden shift in the said stairs. Oh shit! Exclaimed Naruto. Pull me up, hurry! Shouted Yang as it was a race against time. As Naruto pulled Yang up with all his strength, Yang climbed as fast as she could to get on the actual floor on time before hooking her nub around through some iron banister and used her one good arm to grab Naruto by his belt line to his trousers just as the stairs finally collapsed to its fragility. pulling Naruto up. Both let out a sigh of relief before both continued their journey to escape the Ring of Fire. Eventually, they got to the final floor with hopes to their salvation, but there laid one final obstacle to their freedom. "No fucking way," said Yang in disbelief as Sasuke stood there realizing that the blonde duo were alive as he began to aim his gun at them. "Touche," said Sasuke as Naruto and Yang defenselessly to what may or may not happen next. Elsewhere, as Salem had gathered the remaining horsemen, along with anything they can get their hands on, as she stood in front of a ham radio. "Cinder, I need an immediate evac, and I need it since yesterday," said Salem in the speaker. "Copy, milady. We'll send in one of our pilots over to retrieve," said Cinder on the other line before turning off the radio. "So we're going to abandon Lord Orochimaru, Lady Salem?" asked one of the horsemen. "What choice do we have? He was blinded by his own hate to not properly take control of the situation," said Salem in a huff. "It's bad enough that we now must forfeit our control here within the Ring of Fire, and I've no intention to forfeit my own life here today," said Salem as the other horsemen looked at each other and nodded in agreement. "Forgive us, Lady Salem, but we've no intention of leaving here without Lord Orochimaru," said one of the horsemen as they all lifted their arms at Salem. "And you think Lord Orochimaru will forgive your deeds once he's learned of this?" said Salem when she turned to face the horsemen. "We'll accept whatever consequences shall come after this, but we're not leaving Lord Orochimaru," said the only female member to the horsemen. "Tell me, what is your name?" asked Salem. "It's Tayuya, Lady Salem," said Tayuya. "Well then, Tayuya, you and the other horsemen have my blessing in joining Orochimaru," said Salem. Thinking that they all felt a moment of understanding and agreement, the remaining horsemen had let their guard down for Salem to throw a bunch of knives right on between their eyes. "Lady Salem," said Tayuya in surprise before she had a chain wrapped around her neck where Salem yanked it with enough speed and force to break her neck in two. "Yes, you may join Orochimaru in death," Salem said calmly before she averted her eyes to the corner of the room. "Kabuto, I know you're there. Show yourself already," said Salem as the organic mechanic made himself apparent. "I'm surprised how you bothered to not lift a hand and had to leave me to fend for myself," said Salem with a huff. "I assure you, milady, for this was pointedly towards the back of the heads of these rejected soldiers," said Kabuto as he lifted a pocket pistol. "Whatever, anyway, we must leave, lest we end up as yet another statistic to the ever-growing pile of corpses today," said Salem. "If I may, Lady Salem, I would like to at least be given the chance to search for Sakura," said Kabuto. "Sigh. Unfortunately, I have a feeling the poor girl is dead," said Salem. "Regrettable. I nonetheless would like to at least confirm it myself, if you allow me, my lady," said Kabuto with a bow. Salem said nothing, but instead walked her way to Kabuto as he stood there waiting for whatever may come next, as she went and stripped him of not only his pocket pistol but a flare gun as well. "You have 5 minutes. If you're not back up on the roof by then, I'm leaving you here to your own fate," said Salem. "Thank you, Lady Salem," said Kabuto, as both went ready to go their separate ways, but Kabuto stopped in his track to simply comment out loud of the current situation. "It's a shame that this has to be the end of the Ring of Fire," said Kabuto as Salem stood outside the open door to another elevator that worked at the moment. "This may be true. However, this is also the start of a new chapter in this accursed world, and this time I'll make sure no tragedy will befall so long as they name reigns a presence over power and reality and loyalty," said Salem, as she still has big ambition plans of her own. With that being said, Kabuto took her words in as a mental note before going back to the corner he was at to pick up a duffel bag filled with mixed goods before heading out. Going down a 2 flight of stairs, Kabuto heard the loud ruckus of some gunshots before he leaned his back into a corner and peeked his head out to see what we were about to where Sasuke had originally held Naruto and Yang at gunpoint. Right now, Naruto laid on the ground with 2 fresh bullet holes in his chest as Yang knelt down under the mercy of Sasuke. "Time to finish this," said Sasuke, as nothing was going to stop him from killing Yang other than Kabuto when he took out a pocket-sized syringe gun and fired a needle in his neck. "What the fuck?" said Sasuke as he pulled the needle out of his neck. That right there was a dose of a new plague which we've called Tsukiyomi. Any second now, you'll start feeling fatigue and feel heavily sleepy before your body collapses and wake up in lymph nodes and break out in both black and red pox," said Kabuto. "You son of a bitch," said Sasuke as he was starting to feel the effect of the virus as his vision went blurry and his gun felt heavier to hold before he dropped it in order to hold his head up. "You want to know what truly makes me a bastard? The fact that Sakura herself was the one who carried the antidote," said Kabuto with a shit-eating smile as Sasuke began to hurry to find Sakura, only to collapse on the ground after walking a few feet. Thank you, said Yang hesitantly as Kabuto made his way towards the blonde duo. I apologize for not coming here sooner. However, I was admittedly preoccupied, said Kabuto as he knelt down to her level. I'm really sorry for what happened to your friend here, said Kabuto. He was a good man, a rare trait to find in this world, and he proved it when he took the bullet for me, said Yang as Kabuto looked at Naruto's chest to see the bullet wounds. Upon doing so, he realized something unique, and that was how the bullets were being pushed out his body by themselves and how the bleeding itself was slowing down. I don't think we have to worry about your friend leaving us anytime soon right now, said Kabuto. What do you mean? Asked Yang as he pointed at Naruto's chest again, where Yang saw the bullets had finally fell out of his chest cavity as it started to heal. What's going on? Asked the surprised Yang. I'm not entirely sure, but all I can say during my life as a medical professional and organic mechanic, I can say that never in all my medical life or knowledge have I ever seen something like that before in my life, said Kabuto as he really hated how they never got the chance to experiment on Naruto before the Ring of Fire went up in flames. Do you think he'll be alright? Asked Yang. I'm going on a limb here when I say yes, but who knows honestly, said Kabuto before he got back on his feet. Here, this is for the both of you. Everything you need here to keep yourself going, said Kabuto as he handed the duffel bag over to Yang, where she spotted her prosthetic arm inside through the unzipped zipper. Grabbing it, she instantly began to put it back onto place, where she felt she was whole again. I must say thank you, but why are you doing all this for us? Asked Yang. Let's just say that I made a promise, well actually a bet with someone where that whoever got to successfully leave the Ring of Fire first got to not only leave with their freedom, but some essentials for their journey, said Kabuto sheepishly. Though, if you want to pay me back, just answer me this one question. Your prosthetic arm, do you remember who not only made it but gave it to you? Asked Kabuto. A woman by the name of Tsunade, said Yang as Kabuto smiled upon hearing that name. Good to know that old biddy is still alive, said Kabuto as he began to walk towards a different exit. Well, will we ever meet again? Asked Yang as Kabuto stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her. Probably never, said Kabuto as he began to put his hood on to cover his head before pushing on a button on his wrist that turned him completely invisible. While there was a lot more Yang wanted to question, she had to focus on getting herself and Naruto out of here first and foremost, as she was the one to carry him out. With Itachi picking up where we left off, Itachi moved fast and up close as he locked the blades against Orochimaru as they grinded their blades against one another. Using a bit of force, Itachi managed to push Orochimaru back before swinging his sword back. But Orochimaru was surprisingly quick to recover and locked blades again, but was tricky enough to give himself some space to swing the butt end of his katana into Itachi's face. Recoiling back and hissing in pain, Itachi barely dodged from getting stabbed in the torso, but was successful and landing a long burning cut across Orochimaru's chest. Orochimaru hardly flinched as he went back for him and Itachi to continue swinging and slash their blades against one another. You've gotten better, said Orochimaru. Only 'cause the student was better than the master, said Itachi as he lit up some more flames on his sword to further intimidate, but also in hopes of splitting Orochimaru's sword in half. Unfortunately, the blade of Orochimaru was more durable. More so, he too had a trick up his sleeve, as one of his many snakes crawled across his forearm and lunged a venomous bite on Itachi's wrist. That's right, there was a Mojave rattlesnake. Lest you intend to retreat back home right now, you have a greater chance of survival. However, if you choose to continue the fight, the venom will spread faster within your bloodstream, leaving you probably a good hour to get cured. That is if you're lucky to get an hour, said Orochimaru, as he knew better than anyone else that the distance between here and the Windmoon Warlords are about a good 5-hour drive away, that is, if you continue to drive at top speed. To Itachi, it mattered very little to him, as he saw this cheap tactic as a sign of desperate act from his former mentor and legendary organic medic. Itachi, exclaimed Kisame in concern, stay back. I intend to finish things soon enough, said Itachi as he set the flame dial to his sword to critical. Taking in a deep breath, Itachi swung his sword almost madly before he went and tossed it overhead behind Orochimaru, where the blade planted itself into the ground, where he used the distance opportunity to shove Orochimaru back to where his blade was, where it promptly exploded, being sent flying and partially on fire. Orochimaru laid his face buried in the ground as Itachi walked his way over while taking out his second flame sword. Sneaky bastard, coughed Orochimaru as he barely lifted his head as Itachi began to lift his sword once more overhead. This time, I'll see to it that you stay dead, said Itachi as he swung his sword down with swiftness and was successfully in beheading Orochimaru. Itachi, we better hurry and get you some anti-venom, man, said Kisame as he began to his sword away back to his hip. Fear not, I always come prepared for any emergency such as this. All you need to do is go into the glove compartment of my car and grab me the medical bag that's inside, instructed Itachi. Alright, man, just hang tight, said Kisame. As Itachi waited patiently, he was surprised to see the sudden arrival of Yang carrying Naruto out. Small world, said Itachi as he began to rest his hand over the hilt of his flame sword. You wouldn't happen to be serving for Orochimaru now, would you? Said Itachi. No way, we just barely managed to escape from this hell that he called the Ring of Fire with our lives, exclaimed Yang. Alright, said Itachi as he began to remove his hand off the hilt of his sword as Yang continued on her way to escape that place with Naruto. Tell me, you wouldn't happen to have seen my brother now, would you? Asked Itachi as Yang froze in place, since she feared that Itachi would ask that question. He's dead. I'm sorry, said Yang as she felt uneasy saying it and felt that this man could snap and simply kill them for not doing anything. I see, said a saddened Itachi as he looked at the ground and let out a shaken sigh. Thank you for telling me this, said Itachi just as Kisame came back with the medical kit. Everything good here, boss? Said Kisame as he could see that Itachi was visibly upset. Yeah, everything is fine, Kisame, said Itachi as he walked his way over to open the medical kit and preparing to inject himself with the antivenom. Why don't you do something useful for your life and get out of here? No one should have any business in the accursed place anymore, said Itachi, as Yang didn't need to be told twice as she hurried her way towards the outside and hopped in one of the many vehicles parked there before driving off on her journey to find Summer and her sister at long last. Time skip. Waking up after being down for a solid 6 hours, Naruto saw that he was resting in the back seat of the car before he groggily got up to see that Yang was driving. How you feeling? Asked Yang. I'm good, just... What happened? Asked Naruto. After you took the bullet for me, some random guy went and ejected something in that Sasuke's guy neck, claiming to be a new plague or whatever, before he gave me back my arm and a bag of goods, said Yang as she lifted up and shoved off her new sawed-off double barrel. After that, I carried your ass back outside, hotwired a car, and now we're back on our journey to continue driving west, said Yang as she purposely left out her confrontation with Itachi. So now, I got a question for you, asked Yang. Yeah, asked Naruto nonchalantly. How is it that you're alive and are able to heal like you do? Asked Yang. The truth of the matter, Naruto doesn't even know himself. All he knows is that ever since he was little, he always had this weird ability to bounce up and dust himself off from any injury. And he noticed this apparentation when he took a shotgun blast to the head shortly after his father took one in the chest cavity. While he could spend his days wondering and questioning every time he'd been mauled, ran over, beaten, shot, stabbed, and even at one point fell to his own death. Frankly speaking, he was lucky enough to be alive and able to move on, unlike many others in the wasteland they lived in. So right now, he was left sitting there trying to answer one of the hardest questions anyone could ask him. With Sasuke, in all reality, Sasuke should have stayed dead for one reason or another, but what was for sure certain was that he wasn't going to die from the new plague Kabuto injected him, only because there was no such thing. If anything, Sasuke was injected by a heavy dose of tranquilizer that would normally put down a rhino, leaving the question as to why would Kabuto lie to everyone like he did back there. For whatever reason, I don't think we'll know anytime soon. What we do know is the fate that fell between him. You see, Sakura never died and was able to escape the Ring of Fire in one piece, though she was able to leave with something of value. Having decided to take a liking to Sasuke, she had personally dragged him along with her as they continued to travel northwest, with Sasuke as her prisoner and personal protector. Right now, they were both taking refuge in an abandoned building, with Sasuke having his pants down and his left arm pinned to the wall with 3 different scalpel blades as he sat chained to a chair. I hope you're hungry, said Sakura as she walked her way over to Sasuke holding 2 bowls of instant porridge, as Sasuke couldn't reply due to him being gagged. No worries, I know you'll enjoy this, said Sakura as she set the bowls aside before stripping herself off her clothes. Making her way towards Sasuke, she sat on his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. It's a little hot, so let's have some fun while our food cools off, said Sakura sweetly in his ear as Sasuke jerked his head in defiance, to which Sakura found such an act to be cute. Don't be like that. After all, you're taking responsibility for me after destroying not only my home, but my world, whispered Sakura in Sasuke's ear before nipping on his earlobe. With Itachi, Having been successful in his campaign to wipe out not only Orochimaru but Raven, Itachi had to deal with only one remaining threat. He saw to the survival of the Windmill Warlords. In the halls of his father's throne lied a great number of dead guards who remained loyal to Fujin Fugaku, as the man himself was on the ground desperately trying to push his son off while escaping. "Fujin Fugaku, is everything alright?" said the voice of a concerned woman on the intercom. "Things are busy right now, sweet cheeks. Please call back in a few minutes," said Kisame as he answered the call in his heavy beaten state, as he had a bullet wound on his left shoulder and a gash on his forehead, hence why he was bleeding. "Kisame, what's going on? Explain yourself immediately," inquired the woman on the other line, as Kisame remained on the sidelines to witness Itachi to finish the deed. Walking his way to the radio, Itachi finally answered the call to settle things and set things straight. "Everything is fine now, Miss Roth," said Itachi. "Homusabi Itachi, is everything alright? What about the Fujin?" asked Roth. "My father is stepping down, apparently. Oh, and please be a dear and spread the word now for everyone to start addressing me as Fujin. Fujin Uchiha," said Itachi. Fujin Itachi, said Itachi, as he knew the night was young and that he had a lot of unfinished business before the day ends. Elsewhere, in the far wasteland in the west, we see one of many mutants that indeed roamed these lands. This one in particular stood at least 10 feet tall, with a scrawny built body. They had one large back horn growing from the right side of their forehead, and a bunch of other stubs and nubs around said forehead area, and more importantly, their nails were long and sharp, like claws, as they extended about a foot per fingernail. Still, compared to the other abominations that roamed the waste, it was considered to be the weakest, but nonetheless it was considered to be dangerous up close. Henceforth, while laying prone on her belly, we see a girl wrapped in a dirty white cloak that was starting to stain in a little bit of red color here and there, as she held a scoped hunting rifle in her hands. Taking in a deep breath, we see she set her sights on the mutant before pulling the trigger and blowing chunks of its head off before the mutant fell to the ground dead. Getting up from her spot, she made her way downstairs with the accompaniment of a small dog whose back legs had been replaced by wheels, as they barked happily alongside her. "Come on, Zwei, we got to properly dispose of its body, lest it starts attracting other mutants," said the girl as she removed her hood off to reveal she had short red or black hair and silver eyes as she picked up a shovel and a hatchet. End of chapter 11. Witness Me by Humble Narrator, Chapter 12, Wrapped in My Blood for Protection. It was a long and brutal battle, one of many that had been fought since the end of the world, but this was what marked as the beginning for one of our heroes in the wastelands of today. Kneeling down, barely holding in his intestines after having been blasted in the gut with a shotgun, we see a man with short, shaggy blonde hair and sideburns as the tickle of blood escaped the side of his lips as he saw his ex-way hacking away of her way of men to death with a machete. "Son of a bitch, nearly killed you, and you rightfully deserve to die by my hands," said Raven when she looked down at her husband in his dying days. "Now, before I kill you, Taiyang, I'll give you a chance to tell me where's Yang," said Raven. "Like I'd sell out my baby girl," coughed Taiyang as Raven gripped on her machete tightly. "She's also my child as well, you selfish bastard, and as her mother I have more right to know where she's at and raise her," said Raven as she stormed her way towards Taiyang. "You were never there for her when it all mattered, and now you think you do? Go fuck yourself," said Taiyang as he looked Raven dead in the eyes upon saying those words. Truth be said, Yang was actually not that far from where she had been witnessing all of this. In fact, she, along with her stepmother and half-sister, had been watching all of this with a heavy heart. Be that way, but know that I shall find her, and I will stop at nothing," said Raven, as she began to lift her machete up above Taiyang, as she came to terms that his death meant the safety of his family. "No!" cried Yang as she ran towards her father's side. "Yang!" coughed Taiyang in horror as he was embraced by her. "Don't kill my daddy!" cried Yang as she held on to him dearly, with tears running down her face. "Yang," said Raven in relief as she dropped down her machete and knelt to her level. "Yang, come with me this instant or leaving," said Raven as she reached out for her daughter, who looked at her in horror and resentment as she buried herself into her father. "Yang," called the voice of Summer as she stood a few feet away from the trio as Raven looked up at her. "Who is this woman?" demanded Raven as she began to furrow her brows. Raven, don't, coughed Yang as she began to hack up more blood. Looking at Summer and the child she had in her hand, Raven didn't need to think hard in putting two and two together to realize the relationship between these two. Could keep it in your damn pants, could you? Said Raven with venom as she went and began to pull Yang away. Yang, you're coming with me this instant, said Raven as she already had a grip on her daughter as Yang struggled to break free. No, I want to stay with my mommy and daddy and my baby sister, said Yang as those words got Raven to finally snap. Pulling Yang back with enough force to toss her behind, she pulled out a gun from her hip and fired 3 rounds into Taeyang before he finally keeled over. Before getting her sights on Summer. You bitch! You dare try and take my daughter away, said Raven as she began to aim her sights on Summer, who froze in horror as she held onto her daughter tightly. Getting up and seeing what was about to happen, Yang got to her feet and charged towards Raven and attempted to push her down with no success. However, it did cause her to miss fire and preventing the death of Summer and Raven. No, I won't let you kill my mommy and baby sister, cried Yang as Raven chose to deal with Yang afterwards as she noticed that Summer chose to beat it and ran as fast and as far away as she could, not letting her daughter deter her from making another kill. Raven was eventually found in a chokehold before being tossed over to the ground by who else than her very own brother. Raven, that's enough, he said as he stood tall and thin, handsome young man with a clean shave and a mullet as he glared down at his sister with shame. Crow, what the hell, said Raven as she got to her feet while rubbing her neck. My words exactly, you maniac, said Crow as he stood in between her and Yang. Seriously, you were going to kill a mother and her child in cold blood and in front of your own daughter, no less, said Crow. I would have spared the child and allowed her to be raised by us, said Raven. That's a load of bullshit and you know it, said Crow. What's a load of bullshit is you suddenly turning soft and sympathetic since you're not better than the rest of us, you killer, said Raven. I may have blood on my hands. The difference between you and me, though, is I refuse to kill children and their mothers, said Crow. So what you're gonna do about it, huh? You're gonna kill me in front of my own daughter, said Raven, as Crow looked back at his true niece as she had eyes of fear between those tears. Don't make me have to do that, Raven, warned Crow as he felt a sharp pain in his thigh. Looking down, he saw that Raven had stepped forward and stabbed him with a butterfly knife while he was looking back at his niece before she went and bit down on his lower lip as Raven pulled the blade out. And you as well, dear brother, said Raven as she began to toss the knife aside before walking past her brother, grabbing Yang by the hand again. You have 5 minutes to compose yourself. We're heading out, said Raven as she dragged Yang along with her, who only tearfully accepted her fate as of now. Crow, on the other hand, sat there and felt disgusted in himself for allowing all this happening in the first place, since he had the power to stop his sister by any means from executing this raid, to have them all abandoning their plans, maybe talk things out for a trade, and overall preventing any more needless killing. Instead, he stood back, did as he told, and nodded along and took part in the killing of many people who were trying to defend their home and maintain some semblance of civility, property, and overall safety. It might be too late for him to save his niece, but he was determined to take responsibility for at least one thing he had done today, and that was ruining the happy family his niece had. Picking himself up, Crow decided to drag himself in the direction Summer had ran off to, that is after he went and cauterized his wound. Eventually, he was able to catch up with her as this didn't go unnoticed by her before she eventually turned around and pulled out a pocket pistol from within her daughter's swaddled blanket. Please just go away and leave me and my daughter alone, begged Summer as she pointed her gun at Crow, who stopped in his tracks. Lady, I assure you that I mean you no harm, reasoned Crow as he put his hands up and gently approached Summer. I'm warning you, said a scarred Summer as her voice hitched a little higher and was on the brink of breakdown. And what? Wake the baby? Cause no offense, having a kid around that small on your body puts you at high risk, especially when they cry, said Crow calmly as he continued to approach Summer. Her breathing began to get heavy and her hands began to shake as Crow got closer and closer, and even though she had every right and opportunity to put Crow down, she couldn't. Carefully disarmed the gun from her hands, Crow had holstered the weapon away before he went and wrapped his arms around Summer to calm her down. Shh, it's okay. I promise not to hurt you or the child, said Crow, as Summer was left in flurry of emotions before eventually breaking down and crying in the man's arms. 1 year later, if you were to ask anyone the different seasons around the year now, they'd look at you like a madman. However, there was a time when spring was around, and even though the world was a cesspool of child-killing bandits and cannibalistic cycles in between the mutants among the flora, fauna, and Homo sapiens, the occasional rogue and damaged automatons and automechanics. Granted, a lot of people who did grow up in the old world were very hesitant to dare eat any of the new life, but there were those daring enough to do anything to survive. Example would be how Crow had finished hunting down and bringing back some squirrel meat, and if you saw what they looked like today, you'd be counting your blessings. However, to give an idea what they look like, picture a squirrel without 85% of its fur. It's at least a half-foot taller, as it was covered in unsightly boils, and its tail looking more bony than the rest of its body, and yet that was the chicken burger of the wasteland that people could easily hunt and eat. "Hey, got us some fresh game," said Crow as he handed the bundle of squirrels to Summer, who was sitting Ruby on her lap. "Thank you. I'll start preparing for our dinner. You mind holding Ruby?" said Summer, as Crow didn't need to be told as they made the swap. "Sure thing. Come to Uncle Crow, kiddo," said Crow as he picked Summer up, who only smiled at her uncle upon seeing his face. "I swear she's your very own little doppelganger," said Crow as he began to nuzzle his face against Summer. "Oh, you," said Summer as she's able to relax and be friendly against the ex-biker. While there was an obvious trust issue between the two, and Summer has had attempted to run away on a handful of occasions, Crow had many times proven himself to be reliable and someone that Summer could depend on for not only her safety and survival, but for her daughters as well. Plus, it doesn't help that without Summer, who wanted to get closer to the man, got Summer to open up and trust Crow a little. "So, how are things out there?" asked Summer. "If we continue the path towards the mountains, we should be safe, especially given now the vegetation seems to be at a rather high abundance, which means there's a chance for us to find a fresh supply of water and game meat to eat," said Crow. "Sounds like a plan," said Summer with a smile as Crow smiled back before he felt his niece pulling on his facial hair. "Ruby, why?" groaned Summer as his niece smiled over the fact she got his attention again. 3 years later. In the years that came since Ruby's birth, it felt like the summer heat was becoming more and more unbearable, along with the fact how the earth seems to be stuck in a year-long summer state. While the nights do keep things cool, it seems like now more than ever that thought of looking forward to the winter's rain or out of the brisk autumn breeze was just another thing left behind along with the old world. So right now, their test for survival was really being pushed to the limits, but it mattered not as Crow had a committed obligation to keep Summer and Ruby safe. And what better way to keep his niece safe than teaching her to defend herself, specifically from a distance? "Do you have your sights set and checked?" asked Crow as he remained rested on one knee as Ruby was lying down on her chest, looking through the scope of a hunting rifle they had acquired a while back, while he looked through a pair of binoculars. "Yeah," said Ruby as she was surprisingly calm and what one even say in the zone, especially given how she's only 4 years old. "Alright, kid, remember that you have to keep two things in mind. That's not only our dinner that we might miss out on if you miss, but a piece of resource as well," said Crow as he's been teaching Ruby not only the importance of hunting and gun safety, but how to not waste the resources like ammunition, food, water, and the like. Taking a calm, steady breath, Ruby was lucky in landing a solid shot and bagged them a skunk. "Good job, kiddo," said Crow as he patted Ruby on the head, who only smiled at her uncle's praise. Once they had finished retrieving their dinner, the duo had journeyed back to their camp, ready to call it a peaceful day if you ignore the increased growing numbers of raider gangs, micro-autocrates-based societies. Mutants suddenly appeared that now ravaged the wasteland. Then, yeah, a peaceful day, or so it should have been. Upon getting closer to camp, Crow could already see from a distance that the place was attacked and their car was missing, with more importantly Summer as well. "Uncle Crow, where's Mommy?" asked Ruby worriedly as the man was at a loss of words as to how he should respond. "I don't know, but I know she's alright," said Crow as he was only lying to himself, as he knew what the most likely outcome was to have been fallen for Summer. We should follow the tracks on the road, right? Said Ruby, hoping Crow would say yes, even though deep down this was a clear sign for him to gather whatever he could on hand, take Ruby and escape, and pray that they'll see Summer again on another day. All right, but stay close, said Crow, as both began to run down the road to catch up to Summer. After running for about a good 10 minutes, Crow had saw a bunch two cars parked just to one another. While the car they used had wound up crashed head first into a ditch. Running up ahead, Crow's heart was racing as he feared for the worst before he heard the faintest cries of Summer begging for help and mercy. Hiding behind one of the cars, he took out only his binoculars, but also a scope 16 and he peeked out to see what was going on. What he saw made his stomach churn and his heart breaking as he saw a group of 4 vandals finishing raping Summer before one of them decided to add final insult to injury by shooting her in the heart with a double-barrel crossbow. Before he could dwell any more on his emotions, he snapped backwards to reality as he heard the sounds of gunfire next to him, as Ruby had not only caught up, but began to shoot away at the vandals one by one. Without missing a single beat, Ruby had killed her mother's attackers, as Crow was left speechless as he turned to see what his niece had accomplished. Removing her eyes away from the scope, Ruby began to cry over the sorrows of having lost her mother. Gently wrapping his arms around Ruby, she began to break down and bawl as Crow couldn't help but cry alongside with her, knowing that he had failed to protect Summer like he promised himself, as he was left in the responsibility to care for his niece from now on. 6 years later, while most of the world had succumbed to the wasteland, there was still parts of it that held some semblance as to what was the old world, and I don't mean the abandoned metropolis cities, vehicles, and guns. There were still small societies who were able to not only prosper because of the fresh water and power, but also how it still had natural plant life to them, which was a marvel to many. Currently, they were in a large settlement that was heavily fortified from the dangers of the outside world that left an imprint that the world had never ended. Given how peaceful and happy the people are, and how one could simply enjoy the autumn leaves, as to how and why they ended up here was simple. Crow wanted to keep Ruby safe from the dangers and terrors of the wasteland, so he brought her here, where he works mainly on security and border patrol. As for Ruby herself, she was currently looking through the pages of a picture book, who, in spite of her age, had no formal education, and so reading and writing were a mystery to her. Eventually, her train of thought came to an end when Crow came in the front door as he limped his way inside. Uncle Crow cheered Ruby happily, almost knocking the man over. "Easy now, kid. Uncle hasn't been the same now after what they did to my leg," said Crow with a smile. "Uncle, I told you to wear your leg brace like the good doctor told you," said Ruby with a pout. "You know, for someone as reputable as either Tsunade or Jiraiya to not only to be in our presence, but we're now to be pioneers of their time, I feel insulted that their means of curing my burned knee is through using a leg brace," jeered Crow as he limped his way over to an easy chair where there was a shot glass and a bottle of scotch waiting for him. "So how was work?" asked Ruby, leaning on her uncle's chair as he began to pour himself a drink. "Not gonna lie, kid, people here are starting to feel a little bit on edge, knowing that we could be attacked at any given day now, with the fear of us getting breached inside," said Crow with a sigh. Truth be said, there was always going to be days like this, but the handful of settlements had he'd seen, plus the optimistic side of him, nothing bad tends to happen, especially against the band of petty bandits who at this point are left to fight with either sticks, stones, or even the occasional tire iron. And given how these days the people they face off against are charging at them in a suicide manner of attempting to throw javelins at them when all it takes is for someone to snipe them from afar, then any worries or potential crisis is averted. "But I don't think we've got nothing to worry about, kid. I think we found ourselves a solid home," said Crow as he patted Ruby on the head. "So, how was your day? Made any new friends yet?" asked Crow, as he was aware how distant and antisocial his niece was. "No, all the kids want to do is either play with toys or read books with words, not to mention Weiss is very bossy to hang around with," said Ruby. "Yeah, I could have figured the snee brat wouldn't be a pain in the ass to deal with," said Crow as he got Ruby to smile. Regardless, kid, I think you should definitely try to make friends here, especially if we plan to live out here for as long as we can, said Crow. I don't need friends. I have you, said Ruby, but I'm an old man and a drunk, and if you were to ask that older schnee bitch, a bad role model, said Crow. And who exactly are you calling a bitch? Came the voice of a woman roughly around Crow's age. She had natural white hair, blue eyes, and wore a clean marine officer's uniform, minus the hat, as her hair was wavy and kept in a short ponytail, as she was equipped with a saber on her hip and set of handguns around her torso, hip, and left leg. Winter, to what do I owe the pleasure of having you come here? Asked Crow with a cool smirk. You and everyone on security are needed to the east gate. Pronto, said Winter. Is everything all right? Asked Crow as he dropped his smile and raised the brow. I'm not entirely sure, but you best get off your ass and get going already, said Winter before she looked at Ruby. Ruby, it's good to see you, my dear, said Winter as Crow had got up and began to follow Winter out of the front door. Uncle Crow, said Ruby as she got the man to stop in his tracks as she gave him a worried look. It's fine, kiddo. Everything is gonna be fine, said Crow with a smile before he closed the door behind him, only to get his mouth violated by Winter desperately trying to tongue him. Upon realizing what she was doing, Crow began to return the affectionate gesture as he and Winter stood outside the house to make out for a minute before pulling away from each other. Don't think I've forgiven you for calling me a bitch, said Winter. Don't be mad, 'cause it's true. Besides, that's the side of you I find attractive, said Crow as he got Winter to blush a little. Anyways, do you know what's going on? Asked Crow as they made their way to the east gate. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure, but if it requires everyone, it's not a good sign, said Winter. After a short trek to the gate, all security and personnel were standing by armed and ready as they can hear words being exchanged between Winter's father and someone unknown on the other side of the gate. Come on, let's see what's going on, said Crow as both went up the railing to see for themselves as to what was causing such a commotion. To their shock, they literally saw an army of armed men in vehicles that had been modified for any to every war in the wastelands and newly crafted weapons to destroy them. And so, in exchange of you not only handing over Jiraiya and surrendering over 60% of your resources, we shall let you live and extend a hand of friendship and protection towards you and only you, said Fujin Fugaku as he stood proudly next to his son Itachi and the organic mechanic Orochimaru. If you think I shall enter an alliance, let alone forfeit any of my resources to a band of raiders, you must be mistaken, said Jacques as he wore the same clean marine officer uniform like his daughter, but he had 2-star adorned to them. Orochimaru, I know you're behind all of this, and your very reason is more so to get Tsunade more than anyone else, spoke Jiraiya, as he was definitely an old man with a surprisingly able body, given how he wore a skin-tight body armor with a red and green flak jacket over it, and had long white spiky hair held back in a red headband. I'm only here to ensure that no harm comes to the Fujin, though if you'd be kind enough to tell us where Tsunade had left to, I'd appreciate it, said Orochimaru with a shit-eating grin. She's gone to God knows where, and even she didn't tell me. I assure you, hell wouldn't tell you shit, said Jiraiya, as Orochimaru frowned a little, but he shouldn't have expected anything different given how Tsunade wasn't one to settle down in one place. Enough, this is your last chance for a peaceful resolution. Surrender and open your gate to us or die, said Fujin Fugaku. For a solid minute, things went silent as everyone waited patiently to hear Jacques' response before he turned his head towards Winter. Winter, once I give the signal, gather your siblings and mother and leave here along with the good doctor, said Jacques as he left no room for argument as he turned his head back to face Fujin Fugaku. Fugaku Uchiha, for the longest I've considered you to be my business rival, and admittedly a man whom I've admired back in the old world, especially your ferocity and affability nature, said Jacques as Fujin Fugaku began to smile. Not many know me by my old name, let alone my old profession, so as a courtesy to you, I shall promise you, my friend, that you and your people shall always be protected and will be given a fair share of gifts to whatever we establish and make in years to come, said Fujin Fugaku. In the old world, I'd be happy to accept your friendship, but now that your business practice is truly your human nature all around, I'd rather not have it or anything to do with you, so do the wasteland a favor and drop dead, Jacques as he pulled a scoped revolver off his body and began to fire away. Winter, we got to go, said Crow as everyone began to battle to the death. Winter sat down, saddened, knowing that she'll lose her father. Winter nonetheless obliged and began to plan their escape along with Jiraiya as they all went to evacuate not only their families but everyone else as well. Ruby, we're leaving, said Crow as he nearly broke the front door down. Uncle, asked Ruby before Crow went into the closet and grabbed 2 backpacks and a duffel bag that's been set aside in case they decided to skip town. Come on, kid, we gotta get out of Dodge now, said Crow as he put Ruby's backpack on her before stepping back outside and began to board inside his car. As he began to drive down the streets, he saw driving out of their driveway was Winter and her family, but missing from them is Jiraiya. Where's Jiraiya? Asked Crow. He said he had to do something before we left, said Winter before both spotted the man leaving his house with a briefcase in hand. All right, whatever you guys do, take this with you and drive. Drive far and drive fast away from here, said Jiraiya as he tossed the briefcase inside of Crow's car. Like hell, we're leaving you behind, man. Now get your ass in the car already, said Crow. So long as I live, Orochimaru won't stop to hunt me down and will kill anyone and everyone who gets in his way. And what he is after is what's in that briefcase and what Tsunade has with her, said Jiraiya. My father has given his life in order to keep you safe, said Winter passively, aggressively, and I apologize for that and all the other families I have selfishly put in danger, so please just go and allow me to atone for my sins here and today, said Jiraiya, as explosions can be heard from a distance. It's now or never. Now go, said Jiraiya as Crow didn't need to be told twice before he began to follow it, as Winter wasn't that far behind shortly after. Uncle Crow, where are we going? Said Ruby to break the ice. I don't know, Ruby. Just, said Crow before he looked at his rearview mirror that they were being pursued by unwanted company. Shit, buckle up, kiddo, said Crow as he began to punch it, but it was futile given how their pursuers had driven high-octane fuel vehicles and were able to catch up with a Lancer shooting a shotgun slung to one of Crow's wheels, causing him to go out of control and crash into an abandoned shack. Once the dust had settled, Ruby had let out a groan before lifting her head in a phased state. Ruby, said Crow as he got his niece to turn her head over to see the state he was in. Uncle Crow, exclaimed Ruby as the crash caused the loose pipe from within the shake to pierce into its way into Crow's chest. You got to run, said Crow weakly. No, I'm not leaving you here too, said Ruby as she gripped onto her uncle before she heard the sudden halt of 2 vehicles approaching them. Gun, grab my gun, said Crow as he was referring to the piece he had on his hip, to which Ruby obliged. Hide, said Crow, just as the bandits approached, who were all laughing at Crow's expense. Thanks for dying for us, man. Save us the trouble, laughed one of the bandits as they got closer. Hold on, I thought he had someone else with him, said the Lancer who attacked Crow. Like who? Asked the different bandit. I think he had a kid on him, said the Lancer. Probably dead, said the first bandit. Well, check it out, man, said the last bandit as they all decided to inquire as to what became of Ruby. As they all got closer and stuck their heads into the window, they weren't ready for Ruby to suddenly pop out and pop them all within nothing but clean headshots. Once she had dealt with the bandits, Ruby heard another car approaching, but was relieved when she saw that it was Winter and her family. Upon running out to check on them, Winter's heart sank when she saw that Crow was dead as his head lay slumped down. Taking a moment to let her tear fall, Winter was relieved to see that Ruby was alive, but also shocked to see her holding a gun and was the one clearly responsible for killing the bandits surrounding them. Not wanting to dwell around any longer, Winter made her way around the car to get Ruby and the briefcase that they were given by Jiraiya and began to take them back with her. Winter, what about Uncle Crow? Said Ruby as she knew her uncle was dead, but remembered that they had at least made time to give her mother a proper burial before they moved on and left. Ruby, your uncle is dead, and right now we still remain being in danger. We got to leave, said Winter without hearing what Ruby had to say before they all drove off. 9 years later, Ruby had, in reality, stayed with Winter and her family for about 10 days before deciding to split from the group herself and attempted to journey back to find her uncle and lay him to proper rest. She never did found her way back, and in time came to terms with it, along with staying alone by herself since. Well, maybe not entirely alone, as she did find Zwei, who would have died in that bear trap if not for her, while she was content in being by herself, and was never short of an interesting day in her day-to-day life. She would think about her mother and uncle on occasions, and the memories she had with them, and the countless stories of her having a sister somewhere out there, even though she felt the chance of her meeting said sister was impossible impossible, and given how she had no sense of direction, plus no one was insane enough to head this far west, where the land is surrounded by ravenous mutants, she wouldn't be opposed to the idea. Speaking of Yang, she was on the right path to reuniting with her sister, just as Naruto was about to share how he was able to heal himself the way he was. Truth of the matter, I don't know, said Naruto, as Yang found that hard to believe. What do you mean you don't know? Said Yang with her brows forward. It means I don't know. All I know is that I was able to always bounce up and heal after getting shot, stabbed, run over, or somehow or however you could kill me, said Naruto. So you're telling me if I were to shoot you in the head, you just heal from it? Said Yang as she was tired of his games. Do it if it'll get you to believe me, said Naruto. Don't tempt me, Naruto, said Yang angrily as Naruto rolled his eyes over the unfair treatment. Seriously, why are you so ironed up? Asked the Naruto. Cause no man gets up and heals himself like that after getting shot in the chest, and now all of a sudden you can, said Yang in disbelief. Trust me, it freaks me out too as I ask myself why only me, said Naruto, as he would honestly like to know how he became like this. But all of that is a story to be told on another day. End of chapter 12.